We learned approximately 5 to 6 years ago that Universe 7's team in the Tournament of Power would not include Majin Buu as a member of their roster, and yeah, that made us mad at the time. In fact, I made a one-off what-if video about what would have happened if he hadn't fallen asleep, so go and check that out, because he's seriously OP in that, so I can understand why sorta he wasn't included. But instead, the people responsible for the creative aspects of the franchise made the decision to recycle Frieza again. The initial response, as I said to that, were negative, and then a bit positive, but then negative again. We recently had just witnessed the return of the Space Dictator in the Resurrection F movie in the arc, and even though the movie was initially well received, it's quickly aged in a very unflattering way. It's something you could actually skip and you wouldn't really miss much. This is especially true after the not-so-good Super Saga, which covered the events of the movie, and really added nothing else except a really dramatic episode 27 when you saw everyone on Earth die. That's pretty much it. Yeah, if you're gonna watch Super, start at episode 27. And now Frieza's back in the manga, so he's coming back all the time. It's like he's fashion, he keeps coming back in. At the time though, around the Tournament of Power, adding Frieza seemed like a huge step in the wrong direction. There were a lot of characters who deserved more screen time, but Frieza was the one that got it, and we were just so frustrated. Why would they even consider bringing him back when his last time out, really, he was just a completely dry facsimile of what he used to be in the Namek saga? But then, on June the 4th, 2017, he actually returned after a long absence. And despite the fact that he was still very much a cruel and evil antagonist, there was something distinct about him that differed from the last time he was there. That something is what has made Frieza work ever since, and it is arguably the thing that is one of the most significant glow-ups for the character in Super, and in fact, ever. It's completely reinvented him without reinventing him. The whole inclusion is right up there with 17 and Piccolo and Superhero. It's funny how one of the primary reasons why he works as a character right now is something so straightforward that it still confounds us to this day, that the franchise hasn't investigated that facet of the character more thoroughly, and honestly, in Super, it paid off. Good on them. Credit where credit's due. Aside from the character development, which is an unusual example of the development of a villain without any attempt to redeem himself in any way, the writing staff for Triple T, that's Toriyama, Toei, and Toyotaro, has uncovered one aspect of Frieza that people have not previously considered. Frieza has a sense of humor now. Not only that, but he is capable of bringing a whole new subgenre of humor into the Dragon Ball universe that has never been seen before. It fits in with his overall character arc to boot in some way, and it seems like a natural progression for this character to take this next step. It just seems very Frieza. According to our current understanding, this Frieza and that Frieza are the same character. It never really had an odd vibe to it either. And in spite of this, the humor that he brings to the table is frequently the reason why he is such a scene stealer in modern times. The humorous aspects of Dragon Ball have been covered at length already, but it is possible for it to be dated and creepy and juvenile and also genuinely funny on a meta level, or even quite endearing. You see, it can take on many forms. However, the series didn't rely on gloomy, dark humor very much at all. It was relegated to fan creations so that people could maybe poke fun at the various sinister implications of the entire series and certain actions undertaken. However, by doing that, it kind of made it not really Dragon Ball, but now things may be changing. After the events of the Tournament of Power, Frieza was reintroduced to the story as a more carefree and jovial individual, a person who had matured. Frieza had previously been sentenced to both death and eternal punishment. The same degree of fondness and amusement that we have for his antics is shared by him now. You can tell that Frieza finds it hilarious that Goku, of all people, is depending on him to help save the universe. It's just a complete dichotomy. You can feel the humor in this situation. It's just really the funniest joke ever told, and Frieza serves as the dead punchline. And that strategy has proven to be successful. The entirety of the situation is hilarious on the granular level, despite the fact that not all of his comedy is intended to be over the top and elicit hearty belly laughs. Suddenly, the interactions that take place between Goku and Frieza begin to resemble those that he has with other adversaries, albeit with the added element of uncertainty and mystery, resulting from the fact that the Emperor can stab him in the back at any time he wants. The The funniest part is that he never does what he promises. Even when he is conspiring with Frost, it's always with the intention of tricking him rather than his team. Oh well, Frost. But those aren't the most convincing parts either. Yes, Krillin is eliminated, which may have been the result of the two of them working together. But for Frieza, it was the most practical solution. Even though he has a charming and coy personality here, he is still a dangerous adversary despite this. He is so delightfully devious, and he brings such a fresh and original dynamic to the goody two-shoes team that makes up Universe 7. And even though the androids have a reputation for being more defiant, can we still consider them to be on the good side of things and well-meaning? What about Frieza? Well, Frieza does what he wants. Even his facial expressions have become more exaggerated, which contributed to the manic state that he was in. And yet, especially after the Granola Saga, we can't say for sure that Frieza isn't a threat to the universe, but even now, he is. But the fact that he is does not prevent him from being macabre and entertaining. Frieza from Dragon Ball Z was courteous, but he was also icy and cruel. And don't get us wrong, he's still a bad guy in Super. And despite the fact that he still has caused mayhem and devastation, he does so in such a deft and sly manner these days that if you watch him, you may find yourself almost willing him on and almost wanting to forgive him. You might find yourself cheering for him in another way, or supporting him. Then you are reminded that he is still a genocidal maniac driven by the desire to conquer. Oops, how does that make you feel? However, he eventually takes over the Granola Saga in the manga just by being there. He had been threatening to arrive throughout the entire arc, and then when he did, he was only in there for about half a chapter before he then scooted off again. But ultimately, his whole interaction with Gas and then the Heaters, it's gloomy, it's macabre, but it's also hilarious. Especially after he mentions that the last few Heaters are now working for him after all of their history. When Black Frieza arrived, Goku and Vegeta were felled in a single punch, and then he simply turned to the remaining Heaters, Oil and Maki, and said, "You two, come with me. Okay, Sans, bye." That, again, is after he had just completely annihilated Gas and Elec, one of whom was supposed to be the strongest being in the universe, and no, he wasn't. And yet, despite all of this, he still managed to come across as menacing and hilarious, and also kind of merciful, because the old Frieza wouldn't have actually allowed Oil and Market to join his side. He would have just taken them out instantly like the rest of them. Immediately after, we thought that after Broly, we'd be simply relegated to him just pulling the strings. There was yet another twist on his formula when the gap seemed to have widened even more, and it was successful. We've already produced a video of Frieza imitating Goku at the conclusion of the story arc, but I'm at a loss for words, man. There are many characters who could use as much love as Frieza has and perhaps deserve it more, but with each appearance of the character after the Tournament of Power, he continues to be new, entertaining, and most definitely funny. Then there's Fighters, oh boy. Despite the fact that the game was already well in development when Frieza returned in the Tournament of Power, it does seem to be very on point with what we have today. They seem to actually be in good sync. Fighters has definitely leaned towards the more fun side of his personality, although it is important to remember that all of the characters do have some funny interactions with one another. Fighters is genuinely a more funny time. It's now abundantly clear to us that one of the things that saved Frieza was the fact that dark comedy was part of his makeup. And he serves as a good example of the fact that you can lean into a more fun-loving side of the character and still make him threatening, give him more dimension and dynamism. And whilst we believe that one of the most iconic villains who is also threatening, the Joker, has become edgier and darker over the years, Frieza has taken a few pages from his book and developed in a similar manner, but also in a way completely opposite. And while we don't want to imply that there is a direct inspirational link between the two, Japanese popular culture has plenty of jovial characters that are still threats. Anyone a fan of Final Fantasy? They can attest to that with the likes of Kefka. There is something to the idea that Frieza has become a Joker to Goku and Vegeta's Batman dynamic. It's somewhat reminiscent of the Batman-Joker dynamic. They can't live without the other. And when it's all said and done, what will the punchline to the joke be? Nobody knows. However, it is quite obvious that Frieza is one of the characters that all the T's of the Triple T are paying a great level of attention to. And for the time being, that serves to Frieza's advantage.